If you're watching this, you've probably found out already if you've received an offer from Oxbridge. If you have received an offer, that is fantastic and well done. But this video is to the people who unfortunately didn't get an offer. If that's happened to you, I'm genuinely very sorry, because I know you must have put a lot of effort into your application, and then to be rejected can be very tough. I want to provide you some support and guidance so that hopefully you can move on from what has happened. If you get rejected, ask them for feedback. Email the college or the admissions tutor and nicely say, hello, can I please have some feedback on my application? And they'll hopefully get back to you and maybe tell you why you didn't get an offer. And this is good because it means that if you want to apply to somewhere else in the future, you'll know what went wrong in your application this time. Or if you want to apply to Oxbridge again, then you'll know what went wrong. Sometimes the feedback can be vague, so do keep in mind that you might not find out exactly why you got rejected. Now, the next thing is adjustment. Adjustment is when you end up doing better than expected in your exams and you are eligible to still get into Oxbridge. There's a lot of criteria needed to be eligible for adjustment, so check out the websites. I've put the links in the description for adjustment at Oxford or Cambridge. Check out the websites and see if you would be eligible for adjustment. Gap year. You could take a gap year if you don't get an offer when you apply in year 13. That is definitely possible, and I know a lot of people at Cambridge who got rejected from Oxford or Cambridge and then applied to Cambridge again and did get in. But there's a few things I do want to say about taking a gap year and applying again. I think it's best if you take a gap year and apply again if you end up getting the grades which are good enough to get into Cambridge. If you end up not doing well enough to even meet the standard offer and want to resit exams, I think it's relatively unlikely that you'd get an offer, but not impossible, so don't lose hope. I also wouldn't recommend applying to the same college that you applied to before, because they might remember you and reject you for the same reasons. So I'd recommend applying to a different college. And a lot of people actually apply to Oxford, get rejected, and then apply to Cambridge, or vice versa. So that's something you could do. But I don't think there's anything wrong with applying to the same university twice, as long as you don't apply to the same college. When you apply for the second time, it's also good to check what the college's policy is on gap year students, because some colleges might not look very favourably on gap year students, whilst others might look quite favourably. So you need to check what they think. You can do so by going on their college website and even emailing the admissions tutor and finding out what they think. If you do take a gap year, it can also be helpful to do something productive. I imagine that an admissions tutor won't be impressed if your plans are just to sit around eating crisps. Postgraduate studies is something you might want to consider. What you can do is do your undergraduate degree somewhere else and then do a master's or a PhD at Cambridge. I'm applying to do my master's at Cambridge, so if you want to hear about my master's application, I've made a video on that, so have a look at that. Now, one of my major points is that the application process is not fair. Ultimately, that is just true. What the application process tries to do is to only accept the students with the most academic potential. But unfortunately, there is no easy way to find out what the academic potential of every student is. Instead, the admissions tutors have tests and interviews and look at your applications to kind of estimate what your academic potential is. But unfortunately, they don't always get it right. Sometimes they accept people who don't quite cope with being at Cambridge or Oxford. And at the same time, they reject people who would have done very well. The admissions tutors are essentially betting whether your academic potential is good enough to get in, but sometimes they won't bet correctly. I would say, though, that overall the application process is quite rigorous, and the people who are definitely good enough to get in, they usually get in, and the people who really won't cope don't get in. It's the people who are kind of borderline. Those are the people who are often rejected even though they would have done very well. Unfortunately, though, not everyone can cope with being at Oxbridge simply because it's such an academically intense place. I got 5 A-stars at A-level, and compared to A-level, studying at Cambridge is just so much more intense. It's not the difficulty of the content, obviously it's difficult, but what sets Cambridge and Oxford apart from other universities is the workload. You have to learn stuff at an insane pace. The terms are really short, they're only 8 weeks long, and they cram in so much content. It's just really intense, and a lot of people just can't cope with that. In fact, one of my friends, they got an offer from Cambridge and they rejected the offer so that they could go to a university which was less academically intense because they wanted a more enjoyable student experience. So one kind of positive side of not getting into Oxbridge is you won't have to deal with this insane workload. And chances are, if you go to another university, you might have a more balanced social life. Whilst at Cambridge, it is quite hard to balance your social life and academic life and all that kind of stuff. There's also a kind of relating point, which is my next point, which is don't be obsessed with getting into Oxbridge. I've come across a lot of people who have said they've been dreaming for years and years of getting into Oxford or Cambridge. But the thing is, most of these people didn't get in. That's because Oxbridge doesn't care about how much you are obsessed with getting into Oxbridge. They care about only your academic potential. So if your academic potential isn't enough, it doesn't matter how much you want to get in. You won't get in, unfortunately. If you want to get into Oxbridge, I recommend not being obsessed by it, but instead focus on being passionate about the course you're applying for and the subject you're applying for. I know that I've got a whole channel that is largely based around Cambridge, but I wasn't obsessed about getting into Cambridge. In fact, I only chose to apply to Cambridge a couple of months beforehand. I was choosing between other universities, and I'm very glad I got into Cambridge, but I wasn't obsessed about getting in for years and years, which a lot of people are. And there's definitely a lot more to life than getting into Oxford or Cambridge. Anyway, once again, I'm very sorry if you didn't get into Oxbridge. And like I said, you can still get in if you just take a gap year and apply again, or adjustment, or if you do postgraduate studies. But at the same time, if you don't get into Oxbridge, don't worry. There's much more to life. And in a few years' time, you might be thinking, oh, actually, I'm quite glad I didn't go because I ended up going to a different university, which is still great, and met lots of good friends. But anyway, I hope you enjoyed watching this video, and thank you for your time.